Wonderful. So I call this telling tales. It's a storytelling for business. And there's my contact details. I'll leave that up for a little bit, just in case anyone wants to get in touch with me afterwards, anything to do with storytelling. And I think we've seen some brilliant presentations, haven't we, so far at this event. But I think the ones that have really stood out for me have been the ones where people have told stories. You know, it's all very well talking about customer experience as a concept, but it's when people say this is a really good example of it. And so this is what I'm going to urge you all to do today, to mine your life and your work for stories that you can tell, like the old folk used to around the campfires many years ago. And I think people that tell stories, their businesses get on better. They're the companies that are doing well, the ones that have the great stories. Okay, so those are my contact details. So these are some of the things I'm going to cover. Why we tell stories. Where do we get those stories from? Because people say to me, oh, it's all right for you, Jeremy, you've worked for the BBC, you've got all these great stories. Where do I get my stories from? So we'll have a look at that. We'll look at why stories work better than facts. Facts are obviously really good, but stories people remember longer. So ideally, you want a fact that's wrapped in a story so people remember what your message is, and then how to bring your stories to life. Okay, so those are the 4 things we're going to try and get through in this session. So first of all, let's talk about why we tell stories. These, I think, are 4 things, and if you could think of anything else in the chat box, put them down. But I think, first of all, stories stick in the mind. You know, we all remember Henry Ford, that he only, with the first Model T, you know, you could have it any color as long as it was black. We always remember those things. So stories stick in the mind. And not just your mind, but other people remember them, and then they'll tell other people. So that's, you know, it's hard to do that with a fact, isn't it? So one fact that I always think is really good is, so Andy Murray, if anyone that follows tennis, Andy Murray was the first British champion in years, because even though the Brits invented tennis, we've always been a little bit rubbish at it since 1936. When Fred Perry, he won the Wimbledon tennis championships 3 years in a row, 1934, 1935, 1935, 6, and then nothing. And all through my lifetime, I love tennis. I was thinking, wonder when the next British man is going to win Wimbledon. And it took forever. It took Andy Murray just a few years back. And then, you know, I could tell you when it was. When was it? 2013, something like that, 2011. I can't quite remember what the date was. I can remember how many years ago, what was it, about 60, 76, 60, I can't remember we can't remember the numbers. But if I tell you that Andy Murray was the first British man to win Wimbledon wearing shorts, then you'll think that's a good fact, because that's a story. The first Wimbledon British man wearing shorts, because in 1936, they were still wearing long trousers, and that sticks in your memory, doesn't it? Crikey, they must be rubbish at tennis. No one's even won it since they've been wearing shorts, because as far as I can remember, we've always worn shorts, because I was born way after 1936. Also, it helps establish your values and culture of your organization. You know, rather than just saying we believe in this, here's a story that backs up why you believe in this. And lastly, I think we all like stories because it's a reward from our days as children. It sticks in our memory, because I remember at school, if we were good, the teacher would say, you can have a story at the end of the day. And then we would be good because we wanted the story, and the story became a treat. It was a reward. If I was naughty at home, my mum would say, you're going to bed without a story. So then it became almost a punishment. You know, the story's the good thing, not having one's the bad thing. So that's why even now, you know, if I'm at a conference and there's a speaker who's just telling me facts, 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 theories, 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 as soon as they tell me a story, I start engaging, I start listening. I mean, that's what we've seen at this event here. The best speakers have been the ones that have told stories. And then I think we learn more about their company as a result. Okay, so this is a little cartoon I had drawn by a friend of mine who's a cartoonist on how to persuade people. So that's me as 3 musketeers. You can think of the 3 musketeers, the old French classic novel. And they're called ethos, logos, and pathos. Now, this dates back to Aristotle. So this is 2,500 years ago. Aristotle said there are 3 ways to persuade people. So this works very well in business. You can either appeal to their ethos, their logos, or their pathos. So what are ethos, logos, and pathos? Because we don't really use those in the modern world. Let me tell you. Okay, so ethos is all about the ethics, the credibility, the history, the reputation. So say a doctor would have a lot of ethos. A long-standing company would have a lot of ethos. You're appealing to their gut. Instinctively, you're going to trust, out of those three musketeers that you've got there, you've got ethos, logos, and pathos. Can you see how ethos has got a slightly bigger feather in his cap? Because he's the credible one, he's the authority figure. So when we're appealing to someone through ethos, we're appealing to their gut instinct. We're thinking, yeah, I think that is a person to trust. And so you trust the musketeer because he's got a bigger feather in his cap. So it's ethics, credibility, history, reputation. So long-standing companies, traditional organizations would go with that one. Logos, now he's the one in the middle. So he's got the slightly arched eyebrows. He's very logical. So that's more science and engineering, and it's all about facts and figures. Problem solvers, they like a good logical argument in a presentation, and you're very much appealing to their head. So the idea is, in any kind of presentation that you're giving about your business, any pitch, any phone call, anything where you're trying to sell your business to someone saying, work with us, you want to be appealing equally to ethos, logos, and pathos. And my problem is that I see far too many businesses just going for the logos. We do this, we're really good at this, we can do this, you need this, so let's work. And actually, I think you need to appeal a bit more to the ethos and a bit more to the pathos. So let's come to the pathos. So that's the little chap on the right. Now he is pathos, that's appealing to people's emotion. It's where we get the word empathy from. And it's where the stories come in. And this is all about appealing to their heart. You know, you make them fall in love with you a little bit by thinking, oh, I love the values of this company. And that's what stories can do that maybe facts can't. And can you see of the three musketeers there, how the pathos one, he's the smiley one. He's the one you think, yeah, I'd go for a drink with him. He looks like more fun. So ethos, logos, and pathos. I'm not saying you've got to go all pathos, but my problem is far too many businesses in 2020, it's all about logos. We do this, you do this, so let's work. And I think you've got to go a bit more pathos, make them fall in love with you just a little bit. So if there are any Star Trek fans, the movies or the old TV series, there's the three sort of big characters that always go down and land on the planet in Star Trek. Dr. McCoy, known as Bones, and he's got lots of ethos, doesn't he? Because he's a doctor, he's got the credibility. Mr. Spock, he's the alien, half Vulcan, half human, very logical. His catchphrase is logical captain. And that's why I've given the middle cartoon figure of me the raised eyebrows. I don't know if you can see that. So he looks a bit like Mr. Spock. And then Captain Kirk, he's the one that Captain Kirk's crew will follow him to the death. They love him. He's the one that falls in love with every alien creature that they go to on the land. Everyone loves Captain Kirk, and he's all about the passion. And that's what I'm saying that you need to have in your business. You need to appeal to people on ethos, logos, and pathos. So that is something from 2,500 years ago that I've just tried to update a little bit. There's three of them, and I'm going to give you 3 ways to remember it. First of all, ethos, logos, pathos. Then make sure in any pitch for business, you appeal to the gut, the head, and the heart. And then remember Star Trek, Dr. McCoy, Bones, Spock, and Captain Kirk. So ethos, logos, and pathos. Any questions so far, Charles, or am I just cracking on?
Crack on. People are saying yes, it's much more engaging. They're agreeing with you. Certainly the 3 ways to remember, certainly very new to me. Good stuff, Jeremy.
Yeah, good. Are you a Star Trek fan, Charles? I
would love to say it's way before my time, but it wouldn't strictly be true. Yes, I did. The original Captain Kirk and the original Mr. Spock. Brilliant. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So that's 3 ways to remember it. And here's another example. I've given you just an excuse to show one of my favorite pictures of a dog on a computer. It's a Pomeranian. And looking at those 3 computer companies, IBM, Dell, and Apple, which one do you think is the ethos, which is the logos, and which is the pathos? Well, I would say the ethos is going to be the longest established one. It's IBM. Now, I don't know exactly how old IBM is, but I know that about 10 years ago, at Twickenham Rugby Stadium in London, I hosted their centenary celebration. So they're 100 and something, which for a computer firm, let me tell you, is quite a long time, isn't it? Because computers haven't been around that long. But before that, they were cash registers, tills in shops. So international business machines, over 100 years old. So they're the ethos. They're like the long-standing, high stature ones. You would just instinctively trust IBM. Now, Dell, they're going to be the logos, because you'd think, well, Dell make a good product and it's a good price. It's good value. It does what it says on the tin. We're very happy with that. You might not love Dell products, but you think they're really good and they do what you want, and they're a little bit cheaper than perhaps the other options. And the pathos, that would be Apple, because people love Apple, don't they? People love Apple computers. Do you ever see people with stickers for other computer companies? You know, Apple people, they always say, how do you know whether someone's a PC user or a Mac user? If they're a Mac user, they'll tell you, and they'll spend ages trying to persuade you why you should be a Mac user as well. So Apple people, I like to say, are evangelists, and it's because their products are shiny. The iPhone, it's lovely and shiny, isn't it? And the iPad and all of the Apple stuff. So, and they've really worked on this story. Steve Jobs was a master storyteller, and his press conferences were like no other tech press conferences I've ever seen. He just stood there and told you stories, and it was fantastic. So IBM, Dell, and Apple, another way of remembering ethos, logos, and pathos. But what I'm saying to you is, don't go just for one of those, go for all of them. So anything you're doing, just have a check, have it like a tick list and think, right, okay, I've got some facts and figures in there. That's right, logos ticked. I've said how long we've been established. I've given them some reassurance that we're the real deal. That's the ethos ticked. Have I got a story in there? No, not yet. Right, let's put a story in that illustrates some of that. Pathos ticked. That's it. Presentation ready to go. You're on your way. Excellent. So let's just have a little poll. I think just write in the chat box here, which do you think is the most powerful out of these? Appealing to their head, their heart, or their gut? Head, heart, or gut? So just write that simple word in. Head, heart, or gut. Which do you think is the most powerful in getting people? What I'm saying here is to persuade people, and particularly in what we're talking about, it's persuade people to do business with you and repeat business and keep coming back. Head, heart, and gut. So I'll just stop share for a minute so I can come out and have a look. We've got a gut. Thank you very much. Nish says gut. Bassam says heart. This is good because I like it if there's lots of different heart, says Charles. Yeah, heart. I think everyone's thinking that because I'm a storyteller, I'm going to be thinking heart's the right answer. The right answer is all of them, and ideally all of them. You know, you should appeal to all of them. But yeah, heart. Right, good. Thank you very much. I'll go back into the screen share. Just nice to come out and see that you're all there. Right. Okay. So that is what I want you to do from now on. Make sure that you're hitting all of those things: head, heart, and gut. Okay. Now let's talk a bit about culture. So the company that I've worked for the longest in my career, and I still do freelance stuff for them, is the British Broadcasting Corporation, which you'll know as the BBC. And the BBC's corporate motto is "Nation shall speak peace unto nation." Can I just ask if you could type in the box, what year do you think the BBC was founded? Or to make it easier, what decade? What decade do you think the BBC was founded? Because it was a long time ago. So the BBC, I'm assuming everyone knows what the BBC is. It's sort of TV and radio and news broadcasting. So when do you think that started? Charles, do you have an idea, Charles, or what are people saying?
I'm going to, do you know, this is why I failed history at O level at school, so I'm not the greatest person to ask. But I'm going to go for somewhere in the, I'm going to go for somewhere around the teens, the beginning of the First World War, without having absolutely zero clue.
Okay. I will tell you then, the answer is the 1920s. So it was founded right early on in the 1920s, and then in the middle, it was founded as the British Broadcasting Company, and then it became the British Broadcasting Corporation when it was given a government charter, but it's still independent of the government, and it's run by a board of governors. Now, we'll talk a minute about what values the BBC has, but what are your values? This is how you work out your culture of your company, and this is how you work out what stories you want to put to try and persuade people. So let's have a think about your values. I'll give you the BBC's first, and then I want people to start putting in the chat box the values that you have in your company. So the British Broadcasting Corporation was formed from the British Broadcasting Company in 1926. It became a corporation, 1926. The original Director General was a man called Lord Reith, and he was a very, very serious man. And he set it up and said it had 3 aims, and their aims were to inform, to educate, and to entertain. And so if you look at that, inform, well, that's all the news bulletins, maybe the sports bulletins, commentaries. Educate, that would be things like lectures, open university, interviews with people. And then entertain, that would be the music, the plays, the quizzes, the light entertainment, anything like that. And I think in any kind of presentation you give in business, you should make sure that it informs and educates and a little bit of entertain so that people carry on listening. And also I would put in for business pitches, inspire as an extra one. So I'd put inform, educate, entertain, and I would add inspire whenever you're doing any pitch, just checking it hits all that. Inform, are you telling them what you do and why you do it? Educate, are you going to show them something they couldn't do before they saw your presentation? Is it going to be entertaining, which is literally just the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down, that keeps them watching, keeps them listening? And then are you going to inspire? Right. This is the interactive bit. What are you or your company's values? Can you please type at least one thing into the chat box? And Charles, I'll get you to read these out if people put them in. I can see you reclining in your chair. No, this is not a holiday. This is a working session. So
you misread
what are your company's values or your personal values, depending on if you work for a large or a small company, or if you're a consultant or whatever. So I just want a value. If you could just put something into the chat box.
Would you like the name of the company as well?
Yeah, why not?
Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay. Tanya, I've got good 3. If you were able to say the name of the company, that'd be brilliant. So I'll just kick off with ours while people are thinking about it. So the Customer Experience Service Association is educate, empower, and engage.
Excellent. 3 E's,
MAF,
that's good.
Yes, MAF is bold, compassionate, together. Like that. Yes, sorry. Majid El's for Tame. Massive group in the region, Jeremy, massive group in the region.
Yeah. So it's something I would encourage everyone to do either now or after the session. Just think, what are the values? And then when you're talking about your company, do you stress what those values are? Because I do think a lot of people, at networking events or conferences or anywhere where they're talking about their company, sometimes people think, I don't want to be seen to be showing off. But if you've done something good, if your company is known for something, if you've won an award or something, tell people about it and keep telling them. And even though you might think, well, I've said this, they're going to be different people each time. You need to blow your own trumpet. Nobody is going to blow the trumpet for you. So this is your chance to use stories to drop into any presentation, any conversation about your business. This is what we do. And this story illustrates it. So I'll tell you a quick story. I did a talk in South Africa in 2010, and it was to a conference of professional speakers. And my talk was how to use humor in a business presentation. And just before I went on, my wife was at the hotel with me, and she said, you can't wear that suit for this presentation because you're too fat for it. And I said, well, thank you very much. She's very supportive, my wife. She said, no, the trousers are just too tight for you now. And I said, look, this is my first big gig in South Africa. I'm going to wear my lucky suit. And then I went down and I had a PowerPoint presentation, a bit like I've got today. So I had my laptop and I bent down to plug it in very low down in the wall. And my trousers split at the back about that much. And the material just ripped like that. And I thought, I'll need to go back to my room and quickly change these trousers. But the guy was literally in the middle of the stage saying, now, please welcome from the United Kingdom with a talk on how to use humor, Jeremy Nicholas. And I thought I may not have time to go and change. So I came out and I literally walked from side to side like this, never once turning my back to the audience, because I thought I can't show them that I've got a big hole in the back of my trousers. And eventually I realized I needed to turn and show them my slides and they would see the back of my trousers. So I said, the worst thing you can ever do when you're giving a talk on using humor is you split your trousers. And there was a little bit of a laugh in the room. And then I said, and that unfortunately has just happened. And there was another little bit of a laugh. And then finally I said, no, really it has. And I turned and showed them, and you could see my red underpants through the back of my trousers. And there was the biggest laugh ever. Now, bearing in mind, this was a talk on using humor, that was fine. In fact, the talk had never gone this well before. So I did my 30 minutes. And then at the end, I said, are there any questions? And this big South African guy put his hand up and stood at the back. And he said, now tell me this, do you always wear those trousers for this talk? Like I'd packed a pair of comedy trousers, which I hadn't. I was just fat. Now, I often tell that story as a sort of icebreaker with organizations, but what it does do, it makes them like me because I'm someone that doesn't mind having a laugh at my own expense. It warms them up, but also it plants into their mind, oh, he's an international speaker because he spoke in South Africa, and that was 10 years ago. So he probably speaks all over the world. And so in my mind, I'm planting a seed. He's someone that we could do business with. So, you know, often at the end, people come and go, oh, we've got an event coming up. Would you be available to speak at that? I think, yes, that's what I do. That's why a lot of the stuff that I've put in are reasons for people to come up to me with just that conversation at the end. Could you do this for us? And I think people will want to work with you if it sounds like you already do the sort of thing that they want you to do. If you can tell a story about doing something that's a little bit similar. There we go. Charles says, that's happened to me. Let's go live to Charles for detail. Was this a trouser splitting incident?
It was a trouser splitting incident. I'd always thought I was as slim as I was 10 years previously. I was wearing a suit that I had from 10 years previously, and I was up doing a workshop to a very large security company. And I was bending forward just to sort of pick something up. I had exactly the same, the full split. And I didn't know what to do. So I just went very quiet, very still and very rigid, and spent the rest of the presentation with people looking very strangely at me, and just shuffled out and changed suits and then told them. I should have been braver. What you did was grand.
Excellent. Right, Tanu says he had initially said bold, compassionate, and together. He's now saying it's bold, passionate, and together, not compassionate. Although to clear it up, he says he's both. Ha ha ha. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tanu. Right, let's go back to the presentation then. I'm just going to share my screen again. There we are. So that's the little bit of interaction. And now, what story could you use to illustrate your values? Where are you going to find these stories? So I have, well, I'll come to that in a minute. I think you've got to mine your life. You've got to think, right, there's two ways of doing it. First of all, you could think, right, what point do I want to make? And now what story have I got in my business that will illustrate that? So that's one way of doing it. You start off with, this is the point I want to make, and this is something that illustrates it. Or the other way is, I've got this really good story. Now, what is the message from that? And either way works. I think the best way, though, is the first way. This is the point I want to make. What evidence do I have to back that up? So where are you going to find those stories? Because this is the thing that people always say to me, where are we going to find the stories? So I think you've got to talk to your team, the people that are actually out in the field doing the work, that are encountering clients every day, saying, have you got some good news stories about my company that I can then use to share with other people to get more business and goodwill and build our brand values? So talk to your team that are on the ground. What stuff have they got? And then the other thing is, it doesn't have to be something that is necessarily very businessy. It could just be something to do with the culture of your work, that, you know, if someone in your work has done something good, maybe not necessarily associated with the work side of it. It might be the sort of corporate social responsibility side, some charitable thing, but something that makes them think that they seem like a good person that I would like to work with. Put those sorts of things in. So mine your life and mine your business world for stories that you can use to illustrate whatever value it is you want to make. Because I mean, because I MC a lot of conferences, I see a lot of speakers, and lots of speakers will all use the same stories about Gandhi or John F. Kennedy or Uber, Blockbuster Video. They'll all use these examples, Airbnb. I keep seeing over and over again. But the best speakers put in stories about their family members. I often talk about my grandmother in my presentations, and I know that no other speaker in the world is going to tell a story about my grandmother, because she only had 4 grandchildren, and the other 3 are my sisters, and none of them are professional speakers. So I think it would be pretty safe to say, if you pick someone that no one else is going to know, you're going to be unique. So for example, if anyone's doing a talk on goal setting, you know, this is what we're going to do with goal setting. The one story they all come back to is John F. Kennedy at the start of the 60s saying we're going to have a man on the moon by the end of this decade. And you know what? In 1969, they did. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, unfortunately, John F. Kennedy had been shot by them. So anything to do with goal setting, I often sit there thinking, I'm just waiting for the Kennedy story. If it's anything to do with change in behavior, change management, disruption, I know there'll be a Gandhi story, because Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. And there's these things that keep coming around again. Maya Angelou saying people will never remember what you said. They'll always remember how you made them feel, which is fine, actually. But as a speaker, I want them to remember what I said. It's no good after this session if you all go off back to your businesses and go, oh, Jeremy was really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed him. I had a nice warm feeling about him. I want you to remember the tips that I shared with you. So ideally, a good story not only makes you feel good about the person, but also makes you do something different. So you've either got to do something different, or tell some people about something, or change your behavior. Or there has to be some point to it. It can't just be, oh, that was good. Yeah, we like that. Yeah, what are you going to do about it? So it always has to be the what happens after. Right. Sorry, I go on a bit of a rant sometimes about this, don't I? But I just do think it's really important, because it drives me mad when people just tell you stuff, and you think, just tell me a story that illustrates it, a good analogy, so I can get my head around it, because there's so much technical stuff at the moment, isn't there? Okay. So I'm going to give you a few little structures, because there's nothing harder when you're trying to work out a story, a presentation, that you've just got a blank sheet of paper. So this is a structure called PREP, P-R-E-P. Okay, so PREP at the top is what it stands for. And then you've got position, reason, example, position. And I've just got a little picture there of a recipe, because this is like a little recipe you can do to put stories into your presentations. Okay, so first of all, you kicked off with the, can I let people into the room? I can see there's someone waiting, Charles, or do I have to let you do that? Yeah, Farhan's just coming in.
Yeah, okay. He's in, that's Farhan.
Yeah, welcome, Farhan. Okay, so this is a structure called PREP, position, reason, example, position. So you start by saying, this is my position, or if you're speaking on behalf of your company, this is our position. This is what we do. This is what we believe in. That's the P. Then you say, this is the reason why that's our position. That's the reason we believe in this. And then the E coming up, the example, that is your story. And that's the tricky bit. That's where you say, and to illustrate that, only last week I was speaking to a client and we agreed this and we did this, and you tell a story. And then lastly, the P at the end is position again. It's a repeat of your position. So you say, this is what we believe in. This is why we believe in it. Here's a story that illustrates that value. And finally, just a reminder, this is our position. And if it's something in the future, so it might be a proposal rather than a position, hey, it still works because it still begins with a P. So it could be proposal, reason, example, proposal. This is what we propose because of this. And I do a lot of media training in the UK with politicians, members of parliament, particularly if they go on a hard-hitting news program. We have a program in the UK called Question Time, where members of the audience will ask questions to politicians and really give them a hard time. And the deal is the politicians do not know the questions in advance, so people can ask anything. And so when I teach people, I say use the prep technique. So you'll see the MPs, they'll write down PREP on a bit card, and when the person says, what do you think about this, even if they don't write it down in their head, they'll be thinking, right, what is my position? Why is it my position? Is there a story I could say to illustrate that? And so if they're a politician, it might be a constituency member came to me and said this, and so as a result, we've done this. So it might be, do you believe in capital punishment? My position is no, I don't believe in capital punishment. This is the MP speaking. No, I don't believe in that because I'm worried that an innocent person might be executed. And the reason, an example for that is in my constituency, somebody's sister was once found wrongly guilty in the 1960s and they were hanged. So for that reason, I do not believe in capital punishment. So, and you can do that with anything. Think of anything in your organization and do a PREP on it. Do your prep. Like we've got the chopping board there, do your prep for anything. What's our position, reason, example, position? Okay, I feel like I've said that a lot of times, but I think it's important. Let's just have a look at some of the sorts of stories that this chap might be reading in the library. So first of all, a hero's journey type of story. So this might be something where you talk about overcoming some sort of adversity. So I work a lot with explorers, mountaineers, sports people. They might have a heroic journey where they've overcome something. And in the business world, this might be, there was this problem and we solved it. So that is the hero's journey. And it's the classic tale from history, really. If you think of in ancient Greece, we had the Odyssey. It was a massive journey, or Jason and the Argonauts looking for the golden fleece. Or in all cultures, there's like a heroic story. Everyone's got these legendary figures that people would gather around the campfires and talk about. And you get the sense over the years, the adventures got bigger and bigger and bigger. So hero's journey, that's a good one. What has been a triumph for your organization? Tell us about that. Then there's what we call a crucible story. And this is where there was some real adversity where you've just put under some pressure. So a crucible is, if you think of it, it's something that you burn something in, you melt it. It was used to make gold in ancient times. It would be a metal container. You'd heat it up and you'd melt the gold, and you put something under intense pressure, intense heat to change the state of it. So what intense pressure problem has your organization come under, and what have you done about it? And this brings some really inspirational stories. I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions at the end of this, but I'm just going to give you 5 different sorts of stories. So the hero's journey, the heroic thing, the crucible thing, which is overcoming adversity, a eureka moment. This will be the moment of revelation where you thought, I get it. It's the aha moment. So the original eureka moment was Archimedes in ancient Greece when he was in the bath and he realized that the amount of water displaced was equivalent to the volume of his body. And he allegedly ran along the streets naked shouting Eureka. I don't know if he did or not, but there we are. What is the Eureka moment? What is the thing that changed for you? The thing that tipped everything in your favor, that once you started doing something, everyone went, that's it. Or, if you've seen other people do it, what made you then think, right, we've got to go the other way and do something completely the opposite? So a Eureka moment is the revelation, and people love that because everyone loves to follow people that are doing something different. Then there's the parable or analogy, or if you think of something like Aesop's fables, the hare and the tortoise. And the reason that we call it a parable is a fable is we're not really saying to everyone, you need to be a tortoise. We're saying slow and steady wins the race. Don't be too hasty. Think about what you're doing. Make sure you've got everything in place. All of those fables and all religions across the world for years have had these inspirational stories, and people would gather in mosques or synagogues or churches or wherever, and whoever the leader would be would tell them a parable to illustrate a point, because often in ancient times people weren't as educated. They didn't understand complicated words, but they could understand a story that would illustrate a point. So the parable is a good way of doing it. And I think in the business world, just some kind of an analogy, and particularly in very high tech things, often I'll see a presentation by, say, an engineer or a scientist to an audience of people that don't necessarily have that level of science or engineering knowledge. And the best ones, communicators, are the ones that give an analogy saying it's a bit like this. So think about that. What can you do to simplify it for people? And then the last one I've just put in is the name drop. Anything to do with celebrity or fame that your company can be associated with is good. You know, so if you've had something to do with Formula One motor racing, or a top sportsman, or a top movie star, or music or something, anything like that is going to get you column inches in the newspapers, on websites. Don't be tempted to say, oh yeah, I didn't want to mention that. Mention it. All of these stories are good for your profile and your business. Right, Charles, I'm just going to have a little break there to see if there are any questions at this point.
There's no more questions. I just made the when you were talking about, you know, not using, you know, the Ubers or the Henry Fords or those sort of the Gandhis. It just reminded me that I always use an analogy with my grandmother and the most revolting cake in the world, which was the Battenberg, to illustrate why we need to be baking customer experience inside the cake. And in a very lot of cases, we use it just as the icing. And I use the Battenberg cake story as that. So, and it works. It does work. And people do remember it. So, yes, that was a little nudge, which I hadn't actually seen before, completely by coincidence. I just happened to make it a personal story.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, Battenberg cake, a lot to be said for it. Can't beat a bit of Battenberg. Nice.
Not the way my grandmother used to bake it, but I'll go with that, Jeremy.
Yes. And for anyone that's not familiar with a Battenberg cake, it's sort of squares of pink and yellow in a four like that, with icing around the outside, and it's a little bit sweet and sickly, but as a child it's lovely. I don't think I've had it as an adult, and I think it might be too sweet for me, but there we are.
Yeah, and the pink inside, that was made out of a food dye which was distilled relative to the cockroach. So that's a little bit of useless information.
Lovely. Well, I always like a cockroach in my cake. So I've just chucked in a picture of a campfire there just to keep everybody nice and warm, because in the old days we would all gather around the campfire. So you can just warm your hands on that and just imagine the ancestors all those years ago all sitting around the campfire telling stories. And this, I think, is what we need to go back to. We need to be telling more stories. And that's my one mission in life, is to get business people telling more stories. So we've talked about where to get them. We're going to talk a little bit about now how to deliver them well. But first of all, you've got to get them. So in the old days, I would carry a book, and I would, every time I came across a story that would make a point, I would write it down. And it might be something I heard on a radio program, a sign that I was out driving in the car and I saw a sign by the side of the road. I think, oh, that might make a point. Or someone in a conversation at a dinner party with friends would say something, and I think, oh, I might mention that. But the important thing is you need to write them down. So I've put my laptop in there as well, because nowadays I have a story file on my laptop, and there I have them tagged. So if it's a story about authority or credibility, or a story about inspiration, I think they're all tagged and I can find them, and I think which one works best for whichever organization. So mine your world for stories. And a great way of doing this is to sit down with your team, maybe have a drink together socially, and just say, right, what stories have we got that show how good we are? Because it's really hard on your own to come up with that. You know, if I say to you, think of a story about your organization, you probably can't think of anything, or you can think of one thing. But if there's 5 of you and you all work for the same organization, you're probably all going to think of 5 different things. And then as each person says one thing, you'll say, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, didn't we do that? Oh, that was good. We had a big win with that, didn't we? Yeah, well, we should definitely talk about that. And then, you know, you might not have all the details to hand, and rather than getting it wrong, then get in touch with the people that were actually on the ground at that point and say, what happened with that? Oh yeah. And they, oh yeah, and we also did another thing. And before you know it, you'll have a big growing library of stories that you're then ready to drop in. So I definitely would encourage having a notebook, but if you're a young person and you think, what the heck's a notebook, then on your phone, I put mine on Evernote. I don't know if you use Evernote, or Microsoft's OneNote is a similar sort of thing. I'm sure there's other things, but I've used Evernote for the last 10 years. And I'll be, you know, at an airport, I'll see something in a different culture that I'll think, okay, I didn't know about that. and I'll just open an Evernote on here, type in like that, put some tags, and then it's all saved and it syncs with my laptop and my desktop. And before you know it, you've got a really good library of stories to illustrate things. So definitely do that. Let's just talk about some leaders that have been really good at telling stories. So you notice quite a lot of mine about ancient Greeks. I do like the ancient Greeks. Alexander the Great conquered the world when he was still just a very young man. And the reason he was so good at inspiring people, because he was taught by Plato and Plato was taught by Aristotle. And so he was fantastic at these powerful arguments, as well as being a brilliant soldier. You know, he had some of the greatest rhetoric teachers. So rhetoric just means persuasive argument. And it was the ancient Greeks that came up with this rhetoric, and that's the ethos, logos, and pathos. And Alexander the Great was brilliant at it. So he would inspire people with his stories. Demosthenes was another guy in Athens, and he wasn't a particularly good speaker. He had a speech impediment, and he didn't have a very powerful voice, but he lost all his money to his uncle, who sort of swindled him out of his inheritance. And Demosthenes had to go to court to try and get his money back. And he knew that he wasn't very good at speaking. So every day he would go onto the beach and he would put pebbles in his mouth, and he would practice talking with the pebbles in his mouth like that, so that he could get more power and he could become clearer. Because when he took the pebbles out of his mouth, you could hear him really strong and powerfully. And then he went into court, and he was such a good orator. He won his case. He got all his inheritance back from his uncle. And then he went on to become one of the greatest speakers in the history of Athens. So much so that even though there was another guy who was his big rival in the sort of who were the top two speakers, and it was it him or was it the other one? The other one, whose name I can't pronounce, but he would always say at the end of his talks, people would go, he's a brilliant speaker. But at the end of Demosthenes' talks, they would go, let's march. Because although he wasn't as articulate and educated, he had so much passion that they would follow him anywhere. And if it was, let's march on the Macedonians or whoever the baddies were at the time, they would all follow Demosthenes, because he had so much passion and power in his presentation, even though he wasn't as articulate. And then lastly, Queen Elizabeth. Now, you'll all have heard of Queen Elizabeth II. She is my queen at the moment, Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. But before Queen Elizabeth II, there was another Queen Elizabeth, and guess what she was called? She was called Queen Elizabeth I. Although in those days, this was 400 years ago, in those days, they didn't call her Queen Elizabeth I because they didn't know there was going to be a second, because they didn't have the power of looking into the future. So Queen Elizabeth I, or just Queen Elizabeth as she was then, good Queen Bess, she was facing the threat of a Spanish invasion, and they were coming in this big fleet called the Spanish Armada that was 3 times as big as the English fleet, and they were going to come up the English Channel and attack London. And she had to inspire her navy. So she gathered everyone together at a place called Tilbury, which is now a dock on the River Thames, just outside London. And she gave this very, very powerful speech to inspire them into battle. And she said, I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart of a king. And what she was doing there, she was appealing to the pathos. She was showing some vulnerability, because they might have thought at that point, not sure I want to go into a battle for a queen. We're going to lose this. Their fleet's 3 times as strong as ours. I think we might not bother. But she said, you know, I've got the heart of a king, and they all loved her and they were all prepared to die for her. And the brilliant thing that she did, and this is the reason that we know exactly what she said, was that she gathered all of these sailors together in this massive field. And this was 400 years ago. So she didn't have a microphone. There weren't speakers. It wasn't like a concert. She just had her normal voice. She couldn't talk to all of them. So she had it written out on parchment, and every 100 yards, one of her captains was reading out the speech at the same time so that they could all hear it. One of them heard it direct from the Queen, and the rest all heard it from the captains all around the field. And we've still got those parchments, so we know exactly what she said. And that's how we know she said, I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart of a king. And she said that she would be prepared to die with them. And I think they thought she was coming on the ships with them, but actually she stayed on the land, because I'm not sure she was quite as confident as she sounded in her talk. And they went off and they beat the Spanish Armada, which was 3 times as strong. Yay. So that's why I speak English and not Spanish. Now, if you know your history a little bit better than that, actually, you'll know that the reasons the Spanish Armada was defeated was there was a massive storm in the English Channel that day that was like a once in 100-year storm, and it ripped their fleet to bits. And then the Brits came in and just sort of mopped up. But hey, it doesn't matter. It's a great story, isn't it? Don't let, you know, that's what I say in business, don't let the fact that it's any kind of story, get it in there. It's a good one. Right. So those are three people I think have had great stuff. But in business leaders, Steve Jobs from Apple, Richard Branson, Virgin, Elon Musk, Tesla, Henry Ford from Ford, all of them have used stories brilliantly. And I would say the best of those is Steve Jobs. And if you want an example of how to use stories to illustrate and get people to change what they're doing and buy a new product, look on YouTube for the original iPhone launch. So I've got one of the latest iPhones here. But the original iPhone, the iPhone 1, which like Queen Elizabeth, wasn't called Queen Elizabeth 1, she was just Elizabeth. That was just called the iPhone. And then it came 2, 3, we're up to 12 now, aren't we? But when the first one came out, Steve Jobs did a brilliant presentation, and the whole of it is on YouTube. It's an hour long, and you can watch the whole of it. And honestly, don't watch a movie tonight. This is your homework. Steve Jobs, you're writing this down. Actually, Charles is writing this down. He's going to, oh no, he's having some water. But this is your homework, to watch Steve Jobs' original iPhone launch, because he comes on and the way Apple used to do these launches for things is that they would invite all these people to California to come and sit in this room, and it'd be a mixture of press journalists, technical journalists from industry, mainstream journalists, and Apple fans, people that just loved Apple because they put a lot of them in because they'd all clap. And for ages, people had been talking that Apple were going to do an Apple phone. They didn't know what it was called, but so they just talked about an Apple phone. And everyone was really hoping that's what it would be. So Steve Jobs comes onto the stage and he says, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about 3 new products we're launching today. And everyone's, wow, you know, the Apple fanatics are clapping. 3 new things. Oh, we thought we were going to get a phone. That was the rumor, we were going to get a phone. But no, it's 3 new things. And he started off by saying, first of all, you know, the iPod, we're bringing out a new widescreen iPod that will carry even more tunes. And everyone claps and thinks, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It's a new iPod, it's widescreen, lovely. But we really want a phone. We were hoping that was going to be a phone. But hey, we'll settle for this widescreen iPod because maybe the phone will be one of the next 2. And then he said, and the second thing is the iPhone. So everyone just erupts and yay, we've got the phone. So not only are we going to get a new widescreen iPod, we've got a phone and something else he hasn't told us about yet. So he's really building up the excitement. And then he said, and the third thing is a new email communicator. And everyone goes, oh, we don't really know what that means, but yay, but it'll be good. And then he says, so it's a widescreen iPod, it's the new iPhone, it's an email communicator. And then he says it again. So it's a widescreen iPod, it's a phone, it's an email communicator. Have you got it yet? This is not one product I'm talking about. This is not 3 products I'm talking about. This is one thing. They're all in the same device, and we're calling it iPhone. And by then he's just got them whipped up like a religious festival into this fervor. Yay, it's 3 things, but it's not 3 things. It's one thing because they're all in the same thing. It's an iPod and a phone and it's an email communicator. We don't know what that is. And that was that. And honestly, that is how you do it. So that's your homework. Sorry, I get quite excited about Steve Jobs. The thing is with Apple people, and I am an Apple person, is that they'll always tell you. So I've just done that. Good. So the structure he used, I'll do a little bit about structures on presentations now, because I do think that it's hard for people to know how to tell a story to start with. So the structure of it, the technique he used there is what I call past, present, future. This is how we used to do it. So he talked about that we've got smartphones, but they're not very smart and they're not very good at phones. You know, so if you remember, before the iPhone, there was the Nokia, the slim silver and gold Nokias. I had them, and the batteries would last like a week, and you could talk on them, and they were brilliant. But they didn't do much else. You perhaps had a snake game on it, and that was it. But they were really good for phones. And then Nokia started doing these ones that folded out, and they had a little QWERTY clicky keyboard. Do you remember those? And then there was Palm Pilots that had a little stylus. And so it was like that bit was good, and then the phone bit was good, but no one had yet done one that was really good at being a phone and really good at being a device. So he talked about in the past what we did. Then he said, this is what we've got now. We've got phones and we've got some smartphones, but they're not very smart and they're not very good at phones. And he said, and this is the future. And then he showed us the iPhone and everyone erupted. So that might be a really good structure for you to use. If you want to make a note of that, how we used to do it, this is how we're doing it now. And this is what we're going to do in the future. And which do you think of those three things is the most important? The past, the present, or the future? I would say it's the future. Because, you know, people haven't turned up for you to give them a history lesson or tell them what's happening now. They probably know. So past, present, future, and the future should be what you're going to do about it, what your company are going to do in the future. And then this is another structure, which is similar. Again, it's a 3. I love my 3s. But this is called problem, cause, solution. So that's why I've got the Rubik's Cube, which I still can't do. I've only ever managed being able to do one of those sides. But my brain is just not big enough to do all sides. So problem, cause, solution. You say, look, this is the problem. This is, and you can demonstrate your expertise then by saying, and this is what's causing it. But the real important bit is the solution. This is what we're going to do about it. So you might start by saying, our company has identified this problem. This is what's causing it. And this is our product or service that we've established that's going to help get rid of that problem for you. Because that's anyone that hears any kind of presentation you ever give it's all about what's in it for me. You know, and if you sit there and just tell them the problem, they go, yeah, we know what we're going to do about it. And then you say, this is what's causing it. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But what are we going to do about it? This is the thing you need to buy. This is the service we offer that's going to sort that out. Oh, why didn't you say so? Brilliant. We'll have that. So I think those are really useful structures: past, present, future, problem, cause, solution. And then how are you going to deliver this message? Well, I think a really good way is to act it out. Because if you think how complicated a TV program is, or a news bulletin, or a documentary that you'd watch on television, there's lots going on it, lots of visuals to watch, lots of very clever wording, and lots for your brain to take in. But most business presentations, it's just a man or a woman standing there talking. And if you're lucky, there might be a PowerPoint. And if you're really lucky, you'll be able to read what it says on the PowerPoint because the writing's not tiny. And hopefully they won't have just put everything up there so you can read a long way ahead. So my big thing is act it out, tell a story. And what do I mean by acting it out? Well, rather than saying, so she said this, and then I said this, so we said, that would be like being a narrator. I want dialogue. So if you think of the way a comedian would tell a story, they would actually act it out. So if I tell you a story about my niece, Lulu, who, when she was 5, my niece came to stay with me, and the contract I had with my sister, who's her mother, was that she had to have 5 pieces of fruit and veg every day. That was the deal you signed. That was the contract with my sister. Lulu had to have 5 bits of fruit and veg a day. So I'm now going to act out this little story. When I'm being me, I'm going to be looking down at Lulu because she's 5, so she's smaller. So there's a little bit of acting out. And when I'm being Lulu, I'm going to be this side, and I'm going to be looking up at me because I'm a big person, I'm an adult. And when I'm being me, I'm going to use my voice. And when I'm her, I'm going to use a slightly higher voice because she's a girl and a child. So I'll say, Lulu, have you had your 5 pieces of fruit and veg a day? Yes. But she didn't look very confident. Now notice when I'm being the characters, I'm not looking at you, am I? It's like being an actor on a stage. But then when I come back as the narrator, I'm looking straight at you. Now we're going back in. So she says she's had it. And I go, have you had it really? Yes. What have you had? Well, I've had ice cream. Well, ice cream's not really fruit and veg, is it? Well, it is if it has a banana in it. Did it have a banana in it? No. So you see how I'm just telling a little story there, illustrating the point that children can say anything. I've put that in as a story because it's not specific to any kind of industry sector. But I think if you're talking about something between you and a customer, act it out. Do one way, do the other way. Don't just say, and then she said, and he said. Think how to tell the story, because round the campfires years and years ago, people, the best storytellers, the gripping ones, would be the ones that act it out, that put a bit of passion into it, a little bit of oomph. And so I do think that is really important. Act it out so that we can get the real emphasis on it. Just a few other little bits, and then I will end by just saying you can ask me as many questions as you want. So I'm conscious I've been talking for an hour now, and I want to fit in lots of questions from you. So 3 in speaking terms is a magic number. What do I mean by that? Well, if you ever have to list things, list 3. It's the perfect number that people can remember. If you do 4, it's too many. So if you're giving an example of best practice, give 3 examples, but don't be tempted to use the 4th. 2's not enough, 3's just right, 4's too many. I don't know why that's a rule, but it just is. Just over the years, speakers to speaker has passed on since Aristotle. 3, that's about the right number. You know, if I said I'm just going to share with you a few examples of why my company is really good, and then I list 17 examples, you'll think, well, we've got the message, mate. You don't need 17. If I only did 2, you think, well, tell me a bit more. So 3 is reckoned to be around the right number. And in fairy tales, for example, so 3 little pigs. I don't know if you know the story of the 3 little pigs, but they built a house to keep them away from the big bad wolf. And the first one built the house out of straw, and that blew down. And the second one built the house out of sticks, and that blew down. And the third one built the house out of bricks, and that survived. And he didn't get made into bacon for the big bad wolf to come and eat up. So you only need 3 things, because the first one didn't work, second one didn't work, third one did work. If we'd had a 4th and a 5th and a 6th thing, yeah, okay, mate, get to the one where it's positive. So 3 is always right in fairy tales. Goldilocks and the 3 bears. If you know the story of that, there's a little girl called Goldilocks, goes into the house of the 3 bears and eats their porridge. And there's the mummy bear, the daddy bear, and the baby bear. And he eats the porridge, and the daddy bear's is too hot, the mummy bear's is too cold, the baby bear's is just right. Then she sits on the chair, and the daddy bear's too hard chair, the mummy bear's too soft chair, and the baby bear just right. And there's always 3 things in fairy tales. Cinderella, if you know the story of Cinderella, there's 3 of them. She's got 2 ugly sisters and her, and then she goes to the ball, falls in love with a beautiful prince. Her shoe falls off. She gets back home, and the prince comes along, and he doesn't know which sister it is. He puts it on one foot, it's too big. One foot, it's too small. Puts it on Cinderella's, it's just right. That is just the rhythm of it. 2, 2, and then the third one is always the right one, the different one, the funny one, whatever. If you want to add a little bit of humor to a presentation, then in comedy speaking, and that's one of the areas that I do a lot of. I do after dinner speaking, but I help a lot of business people to add humor to business presentations. That was what I was doing back in 2010 when I gave that talk in South Africa where I split my trousers. I do it a lot now with business speakers. It's a thing I call tickle my keynote, and the idea being that you would have your talk, and then I would come along and just say, well, you could put a funny line there and a funny line there, and I'll charge you a lot of money. And in return, people will think you're funny, but you're not. You just paid me to be funny, and I've made you sound funny. So in triples, I'll give you this for free. This is how you do this. A great way to get a laugh or a smile in a presentation is you set up a pattern with the first thing. Then you reinforce the pattern with the second thing. And then you subvert the pattern. The different thing is the third thing. So it's like the 3 little pigs. House built out of straw, blows away. House built out of sticks, blows away. We're thinking, right, we know the pattern. House built out of bricks, we're thinking blows away. No, it's fine. So the third one's always different. So if you look at those 3 pebbles I've put there, the bottom pebble is much bigger. So often a good way to get a laugh is to have something that's a lot bigger than the others, or a lot smaller. Or it might be, you might say 2 really big global problems like economic crisis and the pandemic, and then the third thing is a very, very local little problem, and that would get a laugh. Or it might be 2 little local things at the start, and then the third one's a massive big thing, big problem. So it might be problems with the street lights in my local area, problems with the government, local government in my local area, and then lastly, something about Donald Trump or some major world power, Vladimir Putin or something, so that it's like the structure of a joke where 3 men do something, an Englishman, an Irishman, Scotsman, or American, Polish, Russian, whatever culture you're in. There's always 3 people, and the first 2 do things that are very similar. So the first one sets up a pattern, the second one reinforces that pattern, and the third one comes in and just completely subverts it. And that is why we laugh, because we're expecting it to go the way of the other 2, and it doesn't. And that's a lot of humor comes from that. You're thinking it's going one way, and it goes to the others. So just a little thing, if you, in your stories, you want to put a bit of humor in, think about putting a triple in, and the third one has to be weird, different, bigger, smaller, more local, more global, just different to the others. And I promise you that will get a laugh or a smile. Excuse me. I'm going to end with some book recommendations, and then I'm going to take as many questions as you want. So these are all really good books. They're at the top, they're more businessy. At the bottom, they're more storytelling. So Paul Smith wrote a really good book called Lead with a Story, and that shows how some very powerful stories in business have been used to illustrate points. Chris Anderson is the man behind TED. So I would really recommend you go to TED.com and look at some of the stories there. So TED started off years ago in California, and it stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And that was originally what it was, technology, entertainment, design. And people would gather at this conference once a year in California, and they talk about those things. And then they only started videoing it fairly recently, and Chris Anderson took over it, and it's now gone massive on the internet, all these fantastic talks. And a TED talk typically is either 18 minutes or 12 minutes or 6 minutes. And there's a few TED events in the world, but there's a lot of TEDx events, which are independent events. And the idea being, the talks all have to be an idea worth spreading. Okay, so it's such a good idea, you want to share it with people, an idea worth spreading. And so anything you're interested in, go to TED.com, say, right, I want talks on artificial intelligence, return, and it will give you 100 different talks from experts all over the world on artificial intelligence. And they have to be 18 minutes or less. And so the big ones are all 18 minutes. And then the lesser figures get 12 or 6 minutes. So I did a TEDx talk in the UK, and it was called Why Do Speeches Have to Be So Boring? That was my idea, that I thought I wanted people to be able to be engaged by listening to and watching talks. And because my talk was called Why Do Speeches Have to Be So Boring, they put me on at the end of the day, just in case I said anything that then speakers that followed me did. And they might then think, oh, I can't do that because Jeremy says that's boring. And Chris Anderson's book, TED Talks, is brilliant. And I would really recommend it as an audio book as well, because then, you know, you're traveling and he is telling you great tips that storytellers have used to get their message across. And he says, in this talk, he does this, in this talk, he does this. So that's really good from TED, Ted's curator, they call him, Chris Anderson. Then there's The Storyteller's Secret by Carmine Gallo, who's an American writer and speaker, which is really good. And again, he's broken down lots of storytellers' methods and looked at the structure and stuff. And he also did a book called Talk Like TED, which looks at lots of different TED Talks, but I haven't put that in my recommendation just because in Talk Like TED, he says the E stands for education, and it doesn't. It stands for entertainment. And I thought, Carmine, you had one job, mate, to write a book about TED, and you don't know what the middle E stands for. And I know education sounds like it makes more sense, but trust me, it is entertainment. So that's why it's not on my list, although it is a good book. Then Story Theatre Method by Doug Stevenson, who is an American actor who went to Hollywood and didn't quite make it, and then went back to his small town in America, and he started teaching people acting techniques to get their message across in business. And that's where he really came into his own. So Story Theatre Method, I don't like the spelling of it because I'm a Brit and we spell theatre with the R and the E the wrong way, other way around, but I've put the correct one in because that's how you'll find it in your bookshop. Story Theatre Method. And that's the whole thing about acting something out, where you become the character and then the other person like that, and making it into a show. So it's not just a person standing there talking, it's a whole show and tell, make it more of a production. And then The Hero with 1,000 Faces is just the work of art really on storytelling, because it looks at all the hero's journey type stories across the centuries and cultures and religions and histories. The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. But like I say, the more business ones are at the top. And I've written a book, and if you want it, you can have it for free. You can download it at my website. I've made it free while this event's on. So my website is jeremynicholas.co.uk, and there's tabs at the top. Just click on the one that says books, and you can download my book, which is called 1,000,000 Tips on Public Speaking, brackets, volume 1, close brackets, because there's not exactly 1,000,000 tips in that book, let me tell you. There's about, I don't know, 20. So for legal reasons, I have to say volume 1, but there isn't a volume 2. But it's 1,000,000 tips on public speaking, and it's all stuff that I have learned over my many years as a professional speaker. I did my first presentation in 1994, so what's that, 26 years now. Right, so jeremynicholas.co.uk. Shall we take some questions? You can ask me anything, and I will answer it. Oh, Charles has put it on there. That's very good.
Yeah, so anybody questions?
Yeah.
I've got a question whilst people are just thinking. One of the biggest things, one of the most difficult things I found was getting going in storytelling, particularly in business. How would you recommend you actually start? Do you join speaking clubs? Do you actually just practice at home? What would you recommend we do? Because until you actually start to see yourself telling these stories, you don't really know how you come across.
No, so I think, first of all, have an idea of what your story might be, and then start telling it to friends. But don't necessarily tell them that you're practicing on them, because they might not like that. Sometimes if I've come up with some new stuff and I'm out with my friends, halfway through, one of them will say, you're trying out some new material on us, aren't you? And I go, yeah, I am. And they go, okay, well, don't do that. So it's every time that you tell a story, you will get better at telling it, because what tends to happen is people put too much information in, and you don't necessarily need to know. You just need to cut it to the bare bones. What's the point of it? Does everything in the story add to something? Does it enhance stuff? Because if not, cut it out, because there's nothing worse than when speakers go on and on forever. I call them rambling speakers, you know, or a shaggy dog story, where people just talk for the sound of it. And typically events, I get really annoyed when people say, I'm going to speak for about an hour. And I think, really? Why not just say, I'm going to, don't let the length of it be what defines it. If they said to me, I'm going to share with you this and this so that you'll be able to do this, I think that's great. But as soon as someone says about an hour, I think, oh, crikey, so I'm here for an hour. But if they're going to tell me something that's invaluable, that's going to change my life, I'll happily listen for 3 hours. But what I don't want to know at the start is how long it's going to take. You know, that's what you do. So a good way to start, Charles, I think, is to write down, and because I love threes, these are the 3 things you're going to learn from this. So I love it when people start a presentation, and we did it, I think it was Stefan Osthaus, I think I saw do this, by saying, I'm going to share this, this, and this. And it was like headlines at the start of a news bulletin. Coming up in this presentation, I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to let you into this secret, and I'm going to show you how you'll be able to do this so that you'll be better than everyone else in your field. And you think, right, I'll listen for that. And if you give them 3 things like that, the chances are some people in the audience will really want the first one, some will want the second one, and everyone will hang on for what that mystery third one is. So set that out. But so many people just start off in a very linear fashion, and they start with this, and then they go to this, and then this, and it's just a plod along. And I think just set out your stall. This is what we're going to do. This is what you'll be able to do differently afterwards, so that you're really telling the audience what is the benefit for them of listening.
Certainly for me, a big chunk of this has been very intentional, because you come out of a session like this and you think, oh, I love the idea of this. I want to go and do lots of sort of this stuff. Then, of course, get to Sunday and it's, you know, you're back in the thick of stuff and it starts to dribble away. What sort of clubs would you, and you know, perhaps you could do speaking clubs, because storytelling and getting into a little bit of professional speaking, even if you're not doing professional speaking to earn money, but to have more impact at work, or perhaps just to broaden your horizons. What would you recommend there, Jeremy?
Yeah, so there's an organization called Toastmasters International, which originally started in America and now it's across the globe. And there's definitely Toastmasters in Dubai and Kuwait that I know about, and I'm sure in many places in the region. So Toastmasters International, just Google that. And their big thing is they give you a 10-stage program to become a better speaker. Now, I did my local Toastmasters a few years ago. And while I enjoyed it, it's very, very structured in this is how you do it. And so they'll teach you breathing and standing and structuring your talk. but everyone gets taught the same way. So that my worry with them is that I think everyone should do it to practice to start with, but don't stay there too long, because otherwise you'll start sounding like all of the other Toastmaster speakers. And I think we're all individuals. So I would say it's a good place to get going, but don't hang around there too long. So that's Toastmasters International. There's also the Association of Speaking Clubs, which is in quite a few different countries, which is a similar sort of thing. But why not start a speaking club in your organization? That's something that a lot of companies I've worked with have started doing. From when I've gone on to done coaching workshops in that organization, they then have a thing where once a week, well, once a month usually, the team would get together and they would share their stories, and then the bosses would decide which ones they think would then get onto the main stage of the conference to tell that story. So I do think Toastmasters, Association of Speaking Clubs, but best of all, if you can start one in your own organization and just develop this tradition of after work having a drink with people and saying, what stories have you got to share? And you get to find out who are the good storytellers in your organization. And it might not be the boss, it might not even be anyone on the board, it might just be someone who just absolutely just has that natural way of chatting, and that maybe then give them a role where they become your corporate storyteller.
Any questions coming from the floor, anybody?
Yeah, I'm prepared to answer any questions at all. If you have any, or communicate with me afterwards and I'll answer them if I can. Do go to my website. Charles has put the address there, jeremynicholas.co.uk, and you can just download that book, A Million Tips on Public Speaking, brackets, volume 1.
Jeremy, I'm going to ask this question anyhow. I know this was the whole point of this conference, was not about to be sort of overtly selling, but there's not many people out there who can help people really get good at this thing called storytelling. What events are you personally doing? Because you do a number. I've been in one. I do recommend them, and it's certainly helped me a lot. So what events are you doing? And are you planning to be doing things virtually, or do you prefer to wait until things go back to live?
No, well, I think it might be a while before things go back to normal. So there's 3 things I do. One is a thing called a Talking Toolbox Masterclass, and it's just a 1-day, and it's virtual now, 1-day session where I run through all the structures that I use. There's 7 structures that I like as templates for presentations, many of them which involve storytelling. So that's the Talking Toolbox Masterclass, and I can anyone that's interested in that, I'll tell them the date of the next one. And if there's a lot of interest in this region, I can even put one on that fits in as a good time zone. I don't mind getting up early for that. So that's the Talking Toolbox Masterclass. Then I do a Talking Funny for Speakers, which is a 6-week program, which is just 1 Zoom call hour a week, and then the rest is all on an online mastermind group and exercises to complete in your own time. And that is how to put some humorous stuff into your presentation. So Talking Toolbox is the serious stuff, Talking Funny is the humorous stuff. And then the third thing I do is something called Tickle My Keynote. And this is if you have a presentation coming up and you think, I just would like to get a little bit of humor into it, or a little bit of help with the structure, you can send me your talk and say, I want you to either make this funny or just to make it more impactful. And then I will suggest some lines for it. And you can either send me the script or you can send me a video of you doing it. And then we'll have a meeting online virtually, and then I'll go away for about a week. So don't send it the night before that you're doing it. I'll need a little bit of time, and I'll do some what I call tickling on it, either making it funny or making it more impactful, whichever you want, or a bit of both. And then I'll send it back and we'll have another Zoom call, and I'll say, there you are, that's your talk. And that's something that I have done since the 90s with BBC people, particularly when they're getting married and they have to do a wedding speech. And you'd think a lot of BBC people would be really good at doing wedding speeches. But of course, for all the presenters and journalists, there's also a lot of camera people, behind the scenes people, producers, editors that maybe aren't quite as natural in front of a camera. And so I would help them with their speaking. And, you know, I did it for about 10 years without charging anyone anything. And then people said, you're really good at this, you should start selling that. So I made that into Tickle My Keynote, and I offer that now as a thing. And it's one of the things that's been really useful during this time when so many events have gone down. it's so brilliant to be able to host this virtual event. And I've been finding that I'm doing about one a week at the moment. But, before that, I would be at 3 events a week speaking on stages, and I'd be on airplanes all the time. So that's gone from 3 down to 1, and it's all virtual, and I'll just do it from my home studio. So things like Tickle My Keynote are a godsend. So please, if you're watching and you think, yeah, that would be good, don't think he's probably too busy. No, I've always got time for that sort of thing. And it's just a joy, actually, to make people's speeches better, because I'm a great believer in, talking to experts. If you know how to do something, great. But if you don't, if something goes wrong with my central heating system or air conditioning or my fridge or something, I don't know how to do that. I could spend ages trying to learn how to do that, and I probably wouldn't do a very good job of it. Or I could just pay someone that knows how to do it to come and sort it. And that's, I have all my working life been either a broadcast journalist or a speaker or a comedian, and sometimes all 3 at once in the same week. So I just think get experts to do things for you. And if you're going to be judged on how good your presentation is, get someone to polish it up, or tickle it, as I call it, tickle my keynote.